Full volume, welcome back. Happy Friday. Finally. Whew. Sometimes the first work week of the year can be the most intense feeling, at least after 2 weeks off. Anyways, welcome back. We are heading into the weekend. Artist Journal, January 9th, 2025, broadcasting from the inner half of the nervous system, deep within inner space. My name's Adrian Pocobelli. It continues, and another day, another masterpiece, as I like to say here. Here's Rat Cloak out of Ukraine. It's hard not to read into the war, frankly, for the last 2 years in a lot of Rat Cloak's work, unfortunately. So a great artist, as many who have been paying attention to art on the blockchain would know. I laugh. I think a 6529 is Rat Cloak on that list. So an interesting piece. Now, Rat Cloak, for those that don't know, or at least as far as I know, I think comes out of painting and kind of made a splash, I would say, on Tezos pretty early on, with these incredible Microsoft Paintworks. Who was it? Rorich described them as these like Microsoft MS Paint artists to me early on. And so that's not what we see here. These are Photoshop works, in a sense, using Photoshop brushes, interestingly. And I have to say, and I've commented on this before, Photoshop has come a long way with their brushes. Like, even 5 years ago, I'm not sure you could have made, what I'd call persuasive paintings with on Photoshop. As we do, what do they call it? It's like we're backstage here, behind the scenes, in the front of the scenes here with Pocobelli. All right, so all to say in Photoshop, but now we have what I'd call, credible persuasive brushes, as we're going to see here. And really nice painting, as we see. Like, it's kind of interesting. Digital painting, using, in a sense, brushes and these tragic... it's hard not to... I hesitate to discuss this work because, in a sense, Rat Cloak is so dark. But just to finish the thought on digital painting before it fleets away... there is a certain, like, as far as brushes that emulate traditional brushes, I feel like digital painting has entered a kind of new era of sorts, in the sense that there were not that many persuasive brushes up until, let's call it, Max, in my estimation. Leave a comment if you disagree or have an example. I'd say max 5 years ago. I think Corel Paint, which I never ever used, at least not in the last 20 years, maybe when I was a kid. I think my dad had Corel Paint, but I'm not sure I used it. He had also Photoshop 8. But using Photoshop 8, you couldn't make a work like this, to state the obvious. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is, I would argue there is kind of a new era, so to speak, in what we could call digital painting, where the brushes that kind of, for lack of a better term, imitate traditional brushes reach a point of credibility where all of a sudden it's kind of like a new era, where all of a sudden you can paint with kind of like oil brushes, so to speak, digitally, and it looks like a beautiful painting. And it looks credible, so to speak. It's persuasive visually. You think of another artist like Uxine, is kind of another great example of a painter. And I should have brought up that tweet. Uxine had this awesome tweet, Rat Cloak, the artist here, Rat Cloak equal legend, or something like that. And yeah, well put. Uxine, such a great sport, really. And so it's interesting. All to say, these, again, these kind of newer brushes, like this technology has gotten good enough where, and we've brought it, kind of circling back to our discussion about Titian, to get us started here on Friday. Remember the randomness. Like, it kind of circles back to this issue of, okay, Titian, Tintoretto, who were the first artists to really celebrate brushwork and, like, in a sense, the randomness, so to speak. And they may not have put it in those terms, but I would. The randomness of the little bristles and brush hairs, and allowing that to stay on the canvas, and that contrasting with the rest. I would argue this injection of randomness into painting was just like we, as I think I mentioned maybe last episode, just like we think of Shakespeare and Machiavelli in certain contexts we can think of as, overgeneralizing, but the first moderns, early moderns, very pioneer moderns, I think in a certain way we can group, I would argue, this is the thesis that I'm presenting to you, I would argue we could start to put injecting randomness into the painting is really a modern thing. Circling back, it's not an easy thing to technologically reproduce randomness in that way, I'd argue. Otherwise, we would have had fantastic brushes 15 years ago. Now it's not uncommon. Like this may not even be, I don't know if this is like, sometimes you can buy brushes and then you insert them like plugins, so to speak, right, in Photoshop. You can import them. This may be native brushes, right? And this is not, this didn't exist, I would argue, as recently as 5 years ago, if I had to guesstimate. It's the last 5 years. And all to say, it's quite interesting because what that technological progress enables is kind of like a new kind of painting. Or a new, in a sense it is. It's like digital painting has taken on a new life, and we had digital painting before. But it's kind of like, as I say, a new era, so to speak, in digital painting here. Just looking at the content here before we continue, with all that being said, we see there are a few things to notice. Actually, let's just finish with the technical, because we started with that. You see the underpainting here, like you see that black kind of outline here, and then also it's painted over top here. Like, again, Rat Cloak comes out of traditional painting, and in traditional painting, the way you build a painting, academically, traditionally, is you kind of build it up in layers, and then this gives it a sense of power, of presence, because you're kind of building things up, and along the way as you build things up, unless you're doing pure academic realism, you're going to let it bleed through a bit. And that's what we see here. And that creates a lot of satisfaction as a viewer, aesthetically. Why? And I would say, it's randomness. There's a kind of certain degree of randomness here. So it's not, there's something to kind of sink your teeth into here, sink your eyes into, so to speak. Here it becomes, and you're looking at this painterly aesthetics, right? I mean, I've also discussed here another kind of classic, I would argue, contemporary painting art technique is to take two colors and then you have them in the same brush thing and not have them perfectly mixed beforehand. And then to, move things across. And what does that do? Again, I would argue it's the incorporation of randomness. Interestingly, I would argue when you look at it ultimately, technically, even philosophically, what is happening when you start doing these kinds of things and it's not perfectly mixed, you're incorporating randomness. Finally, almost like a pure gray background, right? But it is painted. You can see very subtly the clouds. It's quite subtle. And another thing, actually, I'm glad I remembered I want to mention here, is this gorgeous light green. And again, I hesitate to mention the beauty of the work and commenting on it when we see the content, which I've been avoiding here for the first 9 minutes and 30 seconds, which are these people here. And it's mysterious what it all means. This death skull as a pregnant woman. These hard contrasts, quite original, I might add. These hard contrasts, you don't really see this sort of stuff. I mean, it reminds you of like Hieronymus Bosch. It almost seems like when I see this guy, the composition of this guy, it feels like Bosch, doesn't it? even having this kind of like, I don't know if this is what you'd call this thing, for putting gasoline into a tank or something, on top of the head, and then almost no body. And the horse here, almost this headless horseman, but really it's a big head in the clothes, and then maybe the woman in this guy's mind, not sure. Beautifully executed horse. And of course the horse, historically, I mean, I think Ukraine is on the steppes or partially on the steppes. That part of the world, horses, from a military point of view, were very important, I guess. In military history, the horses and the bowed, the arched, with their bow and arrows, so to speak. So that also, with this guy with like kind of a military shirt and no head, there does, I don't know if that's on purpose, but there does seem almost to be like this kind of historical, when I see the horse, particularly in this context, I do think of military, particularly with someone, with a kind of green kind of military fatigues, so to speak, or clothing. And here we have these sad figures here. And I don't know if there's much to be said here. In a sense, what I would say is make of it what you will. This person with their head kind of half, blotched out. And then this kind of, queen of darkness, so to speak, but hard to say, pregnant with death. Seems to be what's happening here. Kolyadka. Not sure if that's a person. I didn't realize this was from a series called Crypto Decadence. That's pretty funny. I'd never heard of that series. I've looked at a lot of the works there. I'd never noticed that before. Cedar Plank, August Ground, at 35 Tezos, so $46 each. US, Uxine, Neon Monk. This is kind of like all-star cast here. There's Rorich, just transferred to Rorich, deservedly. I'd say like the biggest supporter of Rat Cloak's work. So awesome. Oh, sorry. Rorich actually bought this and then sent it to the vault wisely. So awesome. Edition of 10 sold out, bringing in cool $440. Nice work. So here's the Crypto Decadence series. NFT poems about misfortune, one of one, cycle, Rat Cloak. So, of course, Rat Cloak is, kind of a darker artist from the outset, I would say. Wonderfully dark, in a sense, is another way of putting it. And, just for example, and this is some of the older work, but I think I brought up, this is another work from that series, Crypto Decadence. This was only from an edition of 1. It's beautifully painted, hey? Even the text. This is fabulous and seems to, I don't know if it's a pastiche or not, 5,000 by 5,000 digital brushes, Photoshop 2024. And, Rorich brilliantly got this from a collecting point of view, showing collector brilliance for 150 Tezos when Tezos was below $1. So for $110, got this one of one. So as I say, there's always opportunities from a collecting point of view on the blockchain. One of the wonderful things about Tezos and just collecting art digitally. Here's some of the older work, because some people may not be familiar. This is actually the work that introduced me to Rat Cloak. I saw it on Twitter, maybe in early 2022. And that's when I got obsessed. I thought this is insane, is what I thought to myself. Quite literally. And there's the Bored Apes on the pillow there. Brilliant. This is Microsoft Paint. I've shown this work a few times, but I think it merits showing a few times. I consider these like a masterpiece of digital art here. True masterpiece. No kings, no masters, and a terrifying image, even with the kind of the face paint dripping over the Hannibal Lecter mask. You see the brilliance here. So that is Rat Cloak, if you don't know, and I'm sure if you do, you are familiar. So getting us started here. Big thank you to Noah Pred, super interesting space. And I wanted to share here, because people might not have gone, it was kind of tricky in audio to show. And so I wanted to show what this does. This is what Noah does, which is he created this format. It's independent of blockchain agnostic. And you can turn on the layers here. So I assume I can see I turned off the audio. And it's kind of like this multi-layer HTML format where you can use MP4s, you can use MP3s, and you can use PNGs and everything. Different audio. So there's 2 layers of audio. So I just wanted to highlight that because I'm not sure, like, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, I talk about artist tools being kind of this a pretty important narrative here in digital art. So I guess just finally, so I'll hit stop on that. This super interesting format. And here it is. If you go to metamedia.club, you can basically get everything you need to do this. And apparently it works on Taya. Because you're uploading kind of JavaScript, not every platform is excited. But if you upload it to Taya, it appears on Object. But you can do it to anywhere that'll allow you to upload a zip. I think it's a zip file. You can read all about it here. But as you see, HTML, CSS, and I believe JavaScript. Let's go to the comments on last show. So it continues here. These wonderful works by Sabato getting us started. So lots of comments. Thank you. And here's Sabato. Let me just see if I can make that bigger. Thanks so much for featuring my work as an Art of This Millennium artist in residency. These drawings all depict aircrafts made by Brazilian aviator Alberto Santos Dumont in Brazil and maybe France. He's known as the father of aviation. And his 14B bis plane was one of the first heavier-than-air machines to fly. You're right about the background. Santos Dumont inherited a coffee fortune at the age of 19 and spent his life in Paris living the life and building airships. What a great life that sounds like, doesn't it? There were whole airship and ballooning scene. There were a whole airship and ballooning scene in Paris at the time, like the famed Aero Club that Santos Dumont was a part of. While they weren't artists, they were focused on new tech, new materials, and utopian ideas about tech uniting humanity. Santos Dumont made all of his schematics open source and even shared them with the Wright brothers. So this is pretty darn interesting just from a purely historical perspective. Because, of course, the Wright brothers get all the credit, right? And here, this guy's sharing the, designs and everything with the Wright brothers. Still, there was drama, there was intrigue, there was romance, and there was public spectacle. Does it sound familiar? And as I said, indeed it does. So awesome. Thanks for the comment. And it's always awesome to hear from the artists in the show. So thanks, Sabato. Wonderful series. Good luck on the auctions. Captain Starman. First, loving the daily episodes, and under an hour is a good sweet spot. So let's actually keep to that. Thank you for the reminder there. Kind of moving in slow motion here. Stuart Reed. Those Sabato pieces on ETH are wonderful. Got to go look those up. Great show as always. Thank you. I'm thrilled to have you guys watching. Enigma Greg. Great intro. Awesome episode. Thank you. Awesome to hear. And Static Drama. Journey Runs Adrian. Awesome. It continues here. So thanks for the comments. And also, thanks for the support. This is pretty good for these daily, considering how often I'm putting out videos here. Thrilled to see that. Gogolitis, I can't say it enough. Thank you. Well, love your work, Gogo, and always thrilled to show your work here. Lone Wick, the plain piece by Sabato is amazing. So getting a lot of positive feedback on Sabato's work. You don't know who we are, GM. Good morning, my friend. And here is some work by BBC. And B, feel like you are already doing 2 a day. Yesterday I did... Yeah, I'm going to have to figure that out because it is too much, in a sense, for my schedule. I think Tuesdays I got to kill. Just because I do another show for my regular work, which is a Northern Miner podcast. And so I think I have to kill Tuesdays because it's really just too much. Unless I do a 10-minute show, but I think I should just kill it. Anyways, best vibes, bro. Because I did 2 shows a day for the last 2 days. So that's 4 shows in the last 2 days because I did the space yesterday and a show, right? So I don't know if the world needs that much Pocobelli, but anyways, so I continue to appreciate the support here. Alex Benj, great point about Rodeo's operational costs. Yeah, Luke was highlighting that, Luke 500. Lots of discussion going on about whether Rodeo is good or bad for artists, but you got to give flowers to the team for taking the risk to even build it. Great show as always. Thank you, OX Benj. I think OX Benj is a pretty prominent account. Actually, OX Benj, I remember, longtime viewer, actually. So So shout out to OX Bench. Great to hear from you. Raquel Goddard. Yep, not the Wright brothers. 14 bis was also designed by the Brazilian Santos Dumont. Fun fact, I was born and raised in a city just 17 minutes away from his birthplace. So school trips were always went to his museum. He was a genius. So school trips there always went to his museum. He was a genius. Great series. Sabato nailed it again. August Ground, $416. In regard to the secondary on Rodeo. A double take indeed, even a triple take for that matter. Yeah, considering that all the hype that was built that, that's the reason why Rodeo took off for what? For $416? I mean, it's Dune Analytics. I guess it's accurate. It doesn't sound accurate, right? But I mean, I guess we have to take the number for what it is. Neural Divine, Seendolf, and maybe it is. All right? Also, thank you for the posts here, everybody, for the retweets. It's awesome. Jake Studios, big shout out. Love your work, Jake. Totally. What an original illustrator Jake Studios is. Thanks for the comments. Now, what came up in our space, interestingly, you never know what's going to come up with Noah Pred. Near the end, Noah was mentioning how Hans Ulrich Obrist, prominent curator in the contemporary art world, was kind of making a big deal about video games. Interestingly, there's Hans and rethinking the art world. And so it's kind of interesting. So I did just want to see what's being said here. What are you looking forward to most in 2025? So this is an interview with Hans Ulrich Obrist. Next year, we want to focus on video games at the Serpentine. And the reason I bring this up is because of such a, it's kind of what I'd call an essential characteristic of the second generation of digital art. Was people who grew up with video games and the importance of the aesthetic influence of video games on artists after, let's call it 1980. And that this distinguishes the artists from the first generation who didn't grow up with these video games. And I'd say there's a second essential characteristic, which is the GUI. The Mac, drawing with a computer, painting with a computer, using a user interface, because what characterizes the first generation of digital art is you didn't have a mouse, right? So you had to program it in. In a sense, when I look at that's what I see with generative art. It's coding, right? And so in a sense, I see generative art as a product of the first generation of digital art. So just to kind of highlight why we're discussing video games and why maybe we should care. So Hans, prominent curator here, does care. So next year we want to focus on video games at the Serpentine, big sort of contemporary art organization. We produced one last year with Gabriel Masson. It's amazing that more than 3 billion interact with video games today, which is more than a third of the world's population. So what used to be a pastime activity or sometimes niche has become in a way what novels were to the 19th century or what cinema is for the 20th century. And what's interesting? I was talking to in-law relatives, and one of them was playing over Christmas, and one of them was playing the Indiana Jones game, and he's like, it was kind of just as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like this, I think it's on Xbox, like this new Indiana Jones game. And that's pretty interesting. Right? It's also interesting how many artists right now have unrealized video games they want to do. Now, this is an interesting point because, in a sense, what Hans Ulrich Obrist is saying is video games themselves are the art, is I think the trajectory here. And I would argue they're just missing. It's like saying movies are, like they are art, but they're not visual art. And it's like, I think it's a forced thing. So let's continue. We have this technology department with our curators and our head of technology. We have the infrastructure to produce these artists' projects. Like what I find interesting in a lot of the work we look at here, you can see the influence of video games in these images, whether they're GIFs or static images. So it's not gaming itself, I would argue. As interesting as that can be as its own art form. But I think it's kind of confusing, visual art and gaming, and like they can still be different things and gaming can still be art. I'm not, and I had that, it's kind of hilarious. I had that debate with my sister over 15 years ago. I remember in Saskatoon, and so they're coming, and it was hilarious because she was arguing that they were art, and I was like, well, kind of it probably had it wasn't the same argument I have now, but I was reluctant to. So it's kind of funny that my sister, 15 years ago, has anticipated Hans Ulrich Obrist here. There's also in the article in Dazed that came out. We don't really have a date on this article, which is kind of weird. But here is another interview with Hans Ulrich Obrist, saying the same thing. Last year, almost a third of the population played video games. Since the artists, and so obviously more and more artists are looking into this, and here is where we are. Since the 80s, artists like Peggy Awish, Rebecca Allen have brought video games into art practice and critically looked at video games. So you see the focus here is on video games, interestingly, which were developed by a small and intimate group of people coming mostly from an engineering perspective. Over the last few years, we've seen people going into existing video games and using them less as video games and more as a platform. Because again, I think we can totally say, hey, I'd say they're more related to movies if you're talking about video games themselves. But I don't see video games really in the same tradition as Leonardo. I just don't see it. I can see people who are influenced by video games making visual art. That makes sense to me. And then we see the iconography, the kind of visual patterning, for lack of a better term, the visual iconography, pixel art, So it's kind of interesting. Is there anything else here? So they're taking an archaeological look at video games. So anyways, it's just kind of interesting to see what's going on. And this is interesting too. This artist Stuart Devant, who I hadn't heard of, this is a video still from a show at Thaddeus Ropac, and I actually brought up the show. And Thaddeus, if I'm pronouncing this right, Thaddeus Ropac is very kind of high-end gallery, and they did Corey Archangel actually deserves a lot of credit on the whole video game front. As most of us know, with the Mario Clouds, maybe, I don't know if it wasn't the first glitch ROM, but maybe the first artist to put it in a gallery and call it art, to his credit, I believe. And here's this artist, Stuart Devant, with what looks like a video still. I don't know if it's a screenshot, right? You can kind of see it up close here. And here's just another little detail here. There's a book that came out, Games Agency as Art, where Sethi Nguyen, who I think is pretty prominent, I've seen that name before, argues that games, particularly video games, are a distinct type of art, which lets us experience forms of agency we might not have discovered on our own. As such, gaming has the potential to unleash powerful psychic forces. So, again, you see where the contemporary art criticism, critical thinking, let's call it, you see where they're pushing. They're pushing towards video games themselves. And it's to me, it's like calling movies, as if that kind of replaced art. They're confusing visual art and video games, I'd argue. It'd be like confusing visual art and movies. And there is some overlap, right? Video art might be the overlap. But it's kind of more the video art let's leave it there. We're already at 28 minutes here and we're just getting started. Here's also Elaine Stuart Devant, and what's interesting about her is, and she seems to, let's just go here. She achieved recognition for her carefully inexact repetitions of other artists' work. So kind of early concept artist, 1924 to 2014. And here's some of her work. So here's Stuart Devant doing Keith Haring, doing Warhol, right, doing Lichtenstein. So these are her imitations. So interesting, conceptual artist. And so she did this Pac-Man. I don't know if it's just a screenshot or if she recreated this. It's kind of unclear here. So kind of interesting. Let's continue. Rodeo. Is it something like Zora? From Rat Cloak here. The myth. It's more pleasant than Zora in terms of earnings for ordinary artists, but in terms of earnings for ordinary artists, it is not the best. In my case, I'm trying a few days ago how it works, because in Tezos, I'm not having sales. I'm doing the Rodeo experiment. And I think a lot of people are thinking about it that way, as an experiment. So, interesting comment from the myth. And I looked at the myth page, we'll look I have a myth work because he's been putting out a work a day. Well, look at how much he's made, and you just go, I don't think he's making as much as he would have though on Tezos. Is sort of my impression, and I think ultimately that's how this is going to resolve. It's going to be, who's treating the artists the best is, I think, where the artists are going to release the work at the end of the day. I suspect. Rat Cloak, I'm glad when there's a variety of ways to distribute and realize creativity, but for some reason I think it's a matter of hype, which will end sooner or later and this project will disappear. It has all the kind of feelings, doesn't it? It has all the characteristics of kind of crypto hype. And it's good if I'm wrong. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely got kind of strong crypto hype, which I actually don't think helps. Like, I think, like, in a sense, it might be viewed as a good news story for Rodeo. Oh, look, the crypto world has adopted. From a strategic point of view, and maybe this isn't as, they seem to actually be doing well. Look, they're getting network effects and everything, but I'm not sure that you're going to get mainstream adoption by adopting to the, by kind of winning over the crypto scene and then having, as we're going to see here, all sorts of weird, like, oh, now we're going to create tokens, and even the whole 5 to 10x, this crypto paradigm. I think, people in, what I reluctantly call the real world with names, who are not anonymous, who are going, like, these people, when you see 5, 10x, like people in real life, like, they're kind of like, that's not their scene. It's not their culture. And they're quite skeptical, frankly, I'd argue. So I'm not sure you're going to get consumer adoption with that. I may be wrong, just as Rat Cloak says. Rosetio, to think everyone is here for the art is pretty naive. It's clout flips and chaos. So interesting. Well, it sure is. It sure seems that way. But I mean, is it flips? Because if there's only $400 or $420 of volume, I mean, how much flipping is going on? But that's what makes it interesting. I missed that. But that's what makes it interesting. That's funny. Amadon. So it's a little long, and we're going a little long here, which is, but basically pointing out the licensing thing here on Rodeo. Now, this is almost true, as people have pointed out, on every platform. Although some are better than others, but basically, and I'm not sure how accurate this is because I actually read this, and I mean, this is a pretty traditional terms of service, to be fair to Rodeo. Like, it's basically they have, full rights to use it within the context of to reproduce, display, perform, distribute, and transmit original content for the purposes, this is the key part, of permitting other users to mint NFTs associated with the original content, operating, developing, and improving the Rodeo platform, use and incorporate such original content or derivatives of any of the foregoing or any marketing materials, and to reproduce, display, perform, display, and transmit marketing materials on any media. So it's really for the purposes of operating, promoting, sharing, and marketing. So, in other words, if you post on our platform, we can use it as promotion or anything else to do with kind of pushing our platform forward. Display on the Rodeo platform, a third-party platform. Okay, that's okay. Because then, okay, maybe OpenSea. I think that's okay. Social media posts. Okay, blogs, editorials. Advertising, that's ambiguous, like for their advertising or for other people's advertising, right? Because if it's for other people, if all of a sudden Coke says, hey, Hasdrubal Waffle, we love your work, we think you're the next big thing, we want to use you on a Coke commercial, and then, can Rodeo say, hey, actually, we'll sell it to you? Like I assume it's for their advertising. Virtual galleries, museums, that's also starting to get iffy because, yeah, the virtual environments, editorials. So it's a little much, to be honest. Like, I'm kind of back to Bitcoin. Like, you want to avoid, like, if you want to avoid all this, I'm going to make a video. I've been promising this for a long time. I'm going to make a video, how to put your art on Bitcoin. Because, you want to avoid all this, just put it on Bitcoin. In a sense, this is part of the deal you make going on any platform. Some are going to be better than others, but so and he added, when a platform reserves broad rights like reproducing, distributing, or minting derivatives of an artwork, Those permissions effectively undercut the concept of digital ownership for the collector. If you own a digital token tied to a piece of art, but the platform can still exploit that art, yeah, so it kind of does feel a little bit like overreach, nevertheless. Then your NFT ownership is diluted. The technical problem lies in the mismatch between the NFTs on-chain. Like, there's an easy way to avoid all this, which is there are many options out there, and there's also manifold. Like, let's face it, I would argue the real network effects and the real collector, it's going to be on X for the most part if people are buying your NFTs, so to speak. I mean, usually these people are on X. So do you need to, another way of putting it is, do you need to be on Rodeo if you invest in X as your platform to get out to everybody? It's an interesting question. You saw when RJ put out that kind of landscape work put on, I think it was Manifold, if I'm not mistaken, and did well and got multiple bids, right? So did he need a platform? Fungible. Looks like we might see the first Rodeo.club post to hit 1 million mints today. Seems like a redacted way to do a meme coin launch, but I've come too far. Right, and this is, again, so let's experiment, 679,000. So again, all of these crypto machinations, my first rodeo, it's an airdrop, and if you buy the thing, you're going to get money, and I actually don't think this helps, and I just, it just kind of, again, it's kind of like yellow flags, if not orange to red. There was a moment when Circle, put it this way, speaking personally, as an artist, I go, wow, I'm sure glad I never minted on Rodeo, is literally what I say to myself. That may change. Maybe in 6 months, it's the main only platform and I have to be there, so be it. But that's how, that is the sentiment here. As we sip our coffees here this morning. Brian Brinkman, there was a moment when Circle changed the focus, and whatever happened to Shape, right? When Circle changed the focus on Shape L2 from art to meme coins. This is that moment for Rodeo. Cat's out of the bag. So maybe this is kind of like the same thing that we see here. And again, this may work for crypto Twitter adoption, crypto X adoption, or I don't know if this is going to appeal to the mainstream. To the consumer, retail consumer, of friends of yours. I remain, a little skeptical on that. Let's see. I don't think it's good for it. Kizklowski. Okay, it's official now. I'm the CEO of, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Kizklowski. Kizklowski Studio. I'm the CEO of my studio. I registered a company today, and this cave became my office, studio, production line, warehouse, and shipping center. So I just wanted to applaud Kizklowski for what they're doing here. Like, yes, exactly. And nothing's stopping you. So this is, there you go, like, few $1,000s of investment, and here we are. Right? And maybe it's in a house that they already live in, or somewhere, maybe rental of something, nice printer, again, I got a fantastic printer here for 1,000, less than 1,000 euros. And it included the 500 euros of ink that it came with, So I was thinking, if I move, get rid of the printer and just buy it somewhere else, sell it for 200 or 300 euros. And then, anyways. Too much information here. Mr. Bezold, look at this awesome, I believe it's AI. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers here. I say charmingly. I like that. But I think a wonderful composition here. Great crop. Another, like, I talked about, how RJ has done what a lot of us have been trying to do, at least speaking for myself, which is kind of making a hack of using AI as a compositional tool, and then from there kind of being able to create all of these paintings of, multitude of work, be super productive, but still have your own kind of, process that you put on top of it to basically make it your own, but use it as a source of images. So you're not like trying to figure out, is this a good composition? You're just saving a ton of time, and then you're just picking, right? Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. So this is a really nice composition, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, if I was an oil painter, I do oil paint, I know how to oil paint, like, you could take this, what if, right, the alchemical transformation of traveling through the mediums, what if you turn this into a oil painting? It's not rocket science once you know how to oil paint. Theoretically, I could do this, okay? And then you have this beautiful oil paint. Like, that would be pretty darn powerful. So all to say, excellent work here from Mr. Bezold, edition of 1. I don't know if it's been listed yet, and quite a few works actually came up. Here's another one. This is called 1, Does Anybody Have the Time? Edition of 20 for 5 Tezos, and again, playing with the watch here. See how huge, and you see the AI here, so probably raw AI artwork. A pretty nice piece. Again, you do see, like, what if, right? Because this is the thing. Like, when you take these kind of academic realist art painting classes, they basically say, they give you a Renaissance painting. Like, your job is to copy, and you put it right beside. I mean, there's nothing, and then you make a copy, and then they give you the techniques on how to build a painting, right? And there's nothing stopping people from really doing the exact same thing, but with novel images that are created with AI, as John Bezold is doing here. And surely this is going to happen. I'm sure it's already happened. It must have. And to me, where can oil painting go at this point? This is where oil painting can, and I would argue will go, and I'm sure it's already begun, right? Because otherwise, where is oil painting at this point, right? So interesting, beautiful work from John Bezold, speeding through here. Dan Control, Little Angel, so cool, embroidered, so kind of like an embroidery it looks like, but still done with Dan Control's gradients here. A gradient artist, as I'd call him. So pretty cool work, I have to say. Like, it goes beautifully. This little angel with this little angel here, and he even presented both of them side by side on Instagram. And they make a beautiful diptych, if that's in fact what's going on here. So edition of 10 for 10 Tezos and edition of 10 for 10 Tezos. Very nice little series here, original from Dan Control. Here's some works that I'm not sure we saw in December. Very interesting. I don't see, interestingly, a gradient. But we see the repetition that Dan Control likes to do. And these are all still available, 180 Tezos editions of 1. And here's another one, great one, of Mickey Mouse. Here we do see the gradients. I love these works. They're beautiful, what I'd call neo-pop, digital pop, whatever you want to call it. Beautiful works there. Continuing on, another work by Dan Control. This was commissioned by One of One, taking a Picasso and then adding in gradients. I thought pretty cool, actually. And even it looks like, remember we were talking about Jeff Koons, where in the portrayal of the Mona Lisa, changed the scale, but also painted in the cracks of the oil paint. To a certain degree, I'd argue this is what we're seeing here. Putting in, maybe on the original there was damage, and then kind of painting that in wonderfully. So great work here. This came out about a month ago. Nuv 1914, so continuing with kind of a blue and white gradient. This is on object. Interesting, kind of a dual format here. With a little, where you can see basically a juxtaposition of flowers, and I don't know what this is. I guess these squares done with that kind of 3D kind of drop shadow brush or whatever it is. So continuing to experiment here, another One of One by Nuv 1914. So incredibly, here we are. At first it's jarring. What is this 3D brush? And here we are, a week and a half later, many works later, and it's looking fabulous. John Bezold, Mr. Bezold, picking up this One of One for 11 Tezos. Nice work. I have to say, this is another gorgeous abstract here. Only 2 minted. 13 hours left. This is a real gem here on Rodeo from Nuv 1914. And so, yeah, only 2 minted on that. Gorgeous abstract. Here's Kant doing an abstract. So great to see Kant doing some abstract art here. And interestingly, let's just open that up. Only 1 minted so far. And as you see, it kind of fades out a little bit, the brush strokes here, these kind of digital brush strokes, a little bit of gradients there. So awesome to see Kant putting out some abstracts. Cedar Plank, so interesting. Waffles is on My Little Shocker. Is on, not sure what the reference is there, but is on Object. So it continues with the multi-chain journey. And here, kind of a pixelated out, kind of a rough one here, and edition of 5, and I think sent off to friends and collectors. And bidding on the final one is at 16 Tezos. So pretty reasonable. Not sure how much time is left on that. Shall we look? 11 hours. So Generous is putting in a bid here. So cool work by Waffles. Here's Sophie O'Gore, Sushi 3 times. So just a super interesting and original artist here, Sophie O'Gore. Pretty cool piece. Some sushi, maybe the Sophie O'Gore character here. Edition of 8 for $4.40. Might need to pick this one up. This is really interesting. Cableen. A poetic collection created by artists with Down syndrome. And I completely missed this. And they're actually pretty poetic works here. Let me just show you a couple of examples. We Belong Together. So quite beautiful works here. Editions of 12, I guess digital painting and maybe some collage, maybe some physical collage. Super interesting there. 2 sold so far. And so that is on Object. And I guess By Way is I think is the group, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, byway.eth. So pretty cool. And cool that Cableen highlighting that. And, from November, but completely missed here. And isn't that beautiful? Pretty nice artworks here. So all very cool. There's a whole series here, as you see. I wonder if there's any one-of-ones. There's an edition of 3. Because I wonder what they'd go for as one-of-ones, So 2 gone, 1 to go, selling at 47 Tezos each. Awesome. Here is Vidal Herrera. No end, no middle, no beginning. And so here we go. I saw this because Yuri J actually reposted this and said, I picked this up. Interesting artwork, interesting artist. Kind of has a bit of a Yuri J, could hang in the same show, let's put it this way, as Yuri J. Very kind of painterly is how I'd describe this, but very, its own unique style here. Kind of looks like a landscape with a big cloud, but hard to say. Super interesting artwork by Valentin Vidal Herrera. Edition of 10 for 10 Tezos. And there you go, half gone. Here is Enigmatris. Enigmatris, Be the Sky. So pretty cool. Interesting. No ASCII in this one, but it's looking great. Interesting work as ever from Enigmatris. That's on X. Nightmares with the Myth, Chapter 2. Right, so I'll bring up the Myth page here. Let's look at the work. And, okay, here's the Myth page. So, again, $283, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. For 11 works, I think, yeah. I mean, if these are all one-of-ones on Tezos, for example, you'd probably be getting a heck of a lot more, to be just blunt about it. This was a spectacular work here. There were a few spectacular works that Myth put out. I mean, and how much? 114, so got basically maybe $20, right? So it's interesting. I think ultimately the artists are going to go where they're treated best, I think is the self-evident truth on that. Let's make sure we look at the work here. Interesting piece. It's great when artists become prolific, right? Because then all of a sudden all this weirdness starts to pop up. With these awesome Myth flowers, almost like Alice in Wonderland here. A little bit of blood for good measure, cigarette, coffee, and homunculi. With these new Myth colors. Interestingly, yellow, red, and black, I think, are the colors. And then there you see the old green and pink in the background. Let's continue. Yeehaw by Louis Osborne. $829. So that's pretty good. 829 times 17 cents is probably $160. But, yeah, so good. But considering how many mints there, I would still say only. Again, let's just multiply by 20 cents for the sake of argument. We heard 17. That's like, yeah, we could call that, I guess, $160. 829 mints. Let's continue. This is on chain, I believe. Stored on chain, PNG. Cloud 276. We're seeing more of this. This is by Tornado Rodriguez and Fabio Speziari. Speziari. And here is the work, and there you see it. 2 colors, right, to minimize the file size. Very cool. And this show is going to be under an hour if it's the last thing I do. So cool work here. This is at Auction and Cap'n, who's excited, who's also putting work on chain. Has the top bid in there at 12 Tezos. Here's another work also on chain, I believe. I'm not positive on that, by Cap'n, because I believe all of these works by Fragments are on chain, if I'm not mistaken. These other works were. I'm not sure if this one is. I assume it is, but I'm not positive on that because it doesn't say. So anyways, love, it must be though, it's 2 colors, right? So delightful work here from Cap'n. Just absolutely love it. Would make a beautiful print, frankly. And remember, was it Stromo who had the pen plotter? I mean, you do that with this. I mean, or you do the, I picked this one up with the blue on gray. This also kind of looks like it's getting ready for on-chain. I think Cap'n's excited about on-chain. So a couple of more, 3 colors, I guess, with the black, white, and red. Very nice. I love these borders, too. I put it in the Pixel Art Inferno. It's kind of interesting. It's a whole other discussion. Cal Flemmer, 3 body, more on-chain, right? Probably preparing for an on-chain artwork. Gorgeous color here. Love these Spaceworks by Kyle Flemmer. I need to pick one up. Googly Grix. This is E-Boy. So this is on Rodeo. So 164. So if you're putting out a couple of works a day, as 312. So that's what are we at? Maybe $80. I mean, if you're making $80 a day, that's good, right? So let's see. It's a big wait and see. Cool works by E-Boy here on Rodeo. Andre Oliveira Cebola. Key code, pretty cool generative art. This is on Tezos. Kind of love the large pixelation, so to speak. Like it doesn't look like a huge canvas. That's what I'm trying to say. Edition of 3 for 11 Tezos, and still available. Here's LB as we almost finish here. Happy Pills. Very nice, rich texture from LB. This is on edition of 9, and this is available on Object. Still available. Here is Sky Goodman's Slay Gedining. So a GLB here. So interesting GLB by Sky Goodman. This is on Object. This is an edition of 10 for $750. 2 gone. Very interesting piece. Little planet there. Here, as we go into AI, is Scomra. This is also a 10 Tezos auction. Josh has started it off. And so interesting, looking like the desktop here. Beautiful textures as ever from Scomra. Here's another one, GM. So rich, these works. And here is Mikey Wilson, Woody, so probably Woody Guthrie, if I had to venture a guess here. I think Bob Dylan's mentor, if that is the right word for it. So another beautiful AI artwork of a blues guitarist or folk singer, in this case, by Mikey Wilson. And that is your show, my friends. You have a great weekend. Let's see if I can do a show tomorrow. I have a very early, taking a train at 11:30. So let's see if that happens. If not, have a great weekend. Until next time, take care. Under an hour.